Alright, this is the Relapse Part 6, and where we had left off last time, I had just gotten out of detox, and I went to go do the 20th anniversary of Permanent Midnight with Jerry Stahl. It was like the biggest reading of my career. I went off with a couple lesbians, had a threesome, took ecstasy, smoked crack all night, and before I knew it, I was buying balloons of heroin off Skid Row at like 4 or 5 in the morning, and I showed up at my friend Preston's hotel room at 8, told my dad, and I told Preston that I had relapsed, and we all agreed that I needed to get into some sort of long-term treatment. So my dad started looking at places that would take my insurance. I think I had Anthem Blue Cross at the time. And he found a program in Thousand Oaks called La Ventana. And it sounded like a really nice program. I did the initial intake over the phone. I'd been to like 25 rehabs at this point. So I was like a seasoned vet with it. I knew the questions to ask. Hey, can we have our cell phone? Is it co-ed? Is it a 12-step based program? We weren't allowed to have our cell phone. It was co-ed. The way that it was set up was it was going to be at houses. So it was like, a group of nice houses in Thousand Oaks, California, which is in between Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. It's like very suburbia for Southern California. It's just a bunch of cookie cutter houses. Seems like nothing bad happens in Thousand Oaks. It's in Ventura County. And they said they would take me, and they asked me when the last time I used was, and I was honest with them, and they wanted me to go through their detox program. They wanted me to go through detox for a week, which wasn't necessary because I had only used that one night. So I told them that I didn't want to do the detox. I wanted to go to the residential, and they essentially said that I had to clean up for... I had to give them a clean test before they could admit me into their residential treatment, which I think they wanted, the whole program was 90 days long. And, I just lost my condo. My fiancé had left me. My parents weren't letting me live with them. I had nowhere to go. And the amount of money that I was making off my book at the time was pretty minimal. I was making, I don't know, 500 or 600 a month. Definitely not enough to pay an apartment and not enough to get first and last month's rent and deposit. So I really was out of options. I had to go to treatment, and I wanted to get clean. I thought it was absolutely insane that I had just gotten out of detox and I relapsed that quickly. I mean, just like that. So Preston let me stay with him for a week in Orange County, and he was pretty much babysitting me. He took me to the casino every night. We played Texas Hold'em until 7 in the morning. We go play for 12 hours straight, and he was giving me money so that I could play. And about a week later, I was ready to go to La Ventana. So he didn't drive me up. He had like an actress friend, I don't even remember the girl's name, but she had to go up that way for some reason, and he coordinated it so that she would drive me up. Something, I don't know, this few years ago. Forget what the situation was, but I know some actress, some like B-grade horror movie actress ended up driving me to La Ventana. And I went there, and it was everything I thought it was going to be. It was nice houses, and you don't live in the house with females, females have their own house, males have their own house. So I was in like with a group of like 5 or 6 guys, and it was a pretty intensive program. We'd wake up at 7 a.m. and they had like a chef that would make us breakfast, and then we'd all get into the druggy buggy van, and they take us to like their main office where we were put with the females. So it became co-ed while we were doing like the group therapy all day long. I mean, we did group therapy probably from like 8:30 a.m. until 4 p.m. It was very intensive. And I'm one of those people in rehab, I'm like an attention seeker. So I generally have a bad attitude in rehab, not because I don't want to get clean, but usually when I'm in rehab, I'm in a very low point in my life and I just crave attention. So I spend my time telling war stories or being the class clown in the group therapy sessions, and it tends to piss off administrations anywhere I go. There were some girls there, but there were no girls that I really wanted anything to do with at the time, and I was really depressed because I was still going through a breakup. It was a very, very low point for me. And I remember they didn't really like me there. They said that I was trying to subvert the message and I was too defiant with them, and I was always questioning what they were telling us. I didn't necessarily agree with all the recommendations that they were giving us to stay clean. And I kind of had a chip on my shoulder because I just had 3 years clean. I mean, there were like, you know, whenever you're at a rehab like this, there's always like rehab techs that have like a year clean, 2 years clean. And I always, you know, it was hard for me to listen to them patronize me or condescend me, talk down to me when I just had more clean time than they had ever had. And I just had a really shitty attitude while I was in there. So my PO knew that I was at La Ventana. I didn't tell him that I had slipped up again, but the way I presented it to him was that, you know, I felt that emotionally I needed a safeguard, or I needed more long-term treatment just to get better adjusted because of the breakup and the most recent slip. I needed to be in some sort of long-term treatment, which I should have never done, because whenever you tell your PO something like that, now it goes from voluntary to him mandating that I do it. So I was pretty much forced to be there. He's like, okay, well, you're going to complete the program. See, before I had told my PO that I was going to long-term treatment, I could have left whenever I wanted. Now I wasn't in a position where I could do so. So I think I was at La Ventana the first time for 30 days. And I manipulated the staff into letting me finish the program early and go to a sober living house. My justification for that was, I told my dad, like, I was getting, you know, far behind professionally. I was in the middle of writing my second book, and I just felt like 3 months was too long, and I needed to be in a place where I had a little bit more freedom. And that worked, and he agreed, and the staff at La Ventana wanted me the fuck out of there because I think I annoyed them so much. I was always disrupting the groups, and I was constantly getting in trouble for pretty petty stuff, just saying disrespectful stuff or being inappropriate in the groups. And a lot of it, you know, in retrospect, was attention-seeking behavior, just because that's what always happens to me in rehab. I'm so low that I need any stimulation I can get, and usually that comes in the form of seeking attention from other people. It usually comes from trying to hook up with a female, and I usually mold some sort of insta relationship when I'm in rehabs, but there were no women there that I wanted to be with, or I even wanted to, I don't know. It was like, you know, I'd gone from a relatively normal fiancé, and then I'm around all the garden variety Krakow at rehab. It was like trying to shop in the bargain bin after you had something real. And I just wasn't feeling it. Even though usually when I'm in rehab, I tend to gravitate towards anything. Any woman that's giving me attention, I tend to gravitate towards. But that just wasn't the case that 30 days that I was there. So they started escorting me to prospective halfway houses or sober livings. In California, they're called sober livings. Other parts of the country, like when I used to live in Florida, they were called halfway houses. But in California, sober living is just like a house you live at. They drug test you. You work, you know, usually a 9-to-5 job. There's mandated 12-step meetings, and you have to do chores. And that's basically what a sober living is. You can't have girls over, and it's pretty restrictive with curfews and shit like that. So I found this one, and I was looking for the least restrictive place that I could find. That was like the prerequisite for me when I was calling these places from La Ventana. I'd call places, and if it seemed unprofessional, if it seemed like they were disorganized, I wrote it down on my list of potential places I wanted to go. So I was looking, there's a lot of sober living houses that present themselves as sober living houses, but all it is a house somebody owns, and they're charging $150 a week, and they have like a dormitory in the garage, and they're not very strict. And I've been to several of those throughout the years, and now that my federal probation had gotten involved, I was looking to try to get more freedom back, because being in rehab, you know, it was nice. It wasn't like being in prison or being in jail, but I definitely felt my freedom restricted, and I didn't like it, considering how much prison time I had done on my first Fed bid, and I just wanted to get some semblance of freedom back. So I ended up finding a place in North Hollywood, and it seemed like, over the phone at least, it seemed like the most ghetto place I could find. I ended up going to this place just to look at it. Somebody, one of the staff members escorted me over there. It's probably like a, I don't know, 45-minute drive from Thousand Oaks. We get to North Hollywood, and this house is just completely in shambles. It looks like a trap house, and I'm, you know, staff looks at me, is like, oh, I don't know about this. I was like, oh, no, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And he's just like, you know, I go in there, and nobody, like, everybody that lived at that house is just hanging out there. They're playing PlayStation on the couch. It's like 2 PM, so nobody's working, which, from all the experience I have being at Sober Livings, led me to believe, which was, I'd find out was true, that this place just didn't give a fuck what you do. It's exactly what I wanted. So I ended up talking to, some woman ran it, but she was never there, and there was some manager. They always have these, like, very almost socially awkward, socially handicapped guys managing Sober Livings, and this guy fit that bill to a T. Super awkward guy. He was a weird guy. You know, he's one of those guys that was like kind of overweight, and he'd wear the t-shirt that kind of came up above his belly, and his belly would stick out of his shirt, and he looked like he hadn't had a normal job his entire life, completely unkempt, and it's exactly where I wanted to be. I wanted to be with somebody like that because I knew I'd be able to get over on him. So I made the deal. I called the lady. I was like, hey, your place looks great. Really looks like a place that I'm going to flourish, and I'm going to get clean, or I'm going to stay clean, blah, blah, blah. She's like, cool, you can move in like 2 weeks, I think. I was like, 2 weeks? I thought this was going to be immediate because I wanted to get out of rehab. I just didn't want to be in La Ventana anymore. And she said, no, I'm not going to have a bed for 2 weeks, but you can come back in 2 weeks. So the La Ventana was suggesting that I look at, you know, alternate programs that I might be interested in, alternate Sober Livings. And I said, no, that's the one I want to go to. I knew that that was going to be a good one, and that I'd be able to manipulate that place very easily. So I ended up going back to La Ventana, and while I was gone for that day, going to that the Sober Living in North Hollywood, a girl had come that she was like a new girl, and her name was Haley. Blonde hair. She kind of looked like, I don't know, Christina Applegate kind of, but a more drugged out version. You know, very emaciated, and she'd just come off a drug run. And she was there, and all the guys were kind of gravitating towards her because she was the prettiest girl there. And second I saw her, I was like, God, she's coming right as I'm leaving, because she was, you know, like the only pretty girl that was there. So for the next 2 weeks, I completely stopped participating in groups, and my sole mission is just to try to like zero in on this girl. And she has a lot of walls up. She's not, you know, we have like a similar sense of humor, and she loved quoting, you know, like stuff from Anchorman and those kind of comedy films. So we kind of connected on that, but she definitely had walls up, you know, but we got to, through our little inside jokes, we got closer and closer. I think I had like 3 or 4 days left, and I remember this very clearly. They had taken once in a while, they take us to they take us to AA meetings like 2-3 times a day. But sometimes if we went to a meeting like in the middle of the day, they would take us to a local park, and we'd all get to hang out there and eat lunch for like an hour after the meeting. And that particular day we went, and her and I went to a swing set that was, you know, where we were alone. They generally look down on fraternizing with somebody from the opposite sex, but it was at a park. They knew I was leaving. They could see us, and it was like the first chance we had to really have a one-on-one conversation without other people being around. We had kind of a deep conversation, and she opened up to me about how she was a prostitute before she had come to rehab. And she was from San Diego. She got into cocaine at a young, I mean, she had a very like typical story. Got into cocaine at a young age, you know, when she was in high school, and then she started doing crystal meth, and eventually she started doing heroin. So she was addicted to IV heroin, IV meth, And she told me she was also an alcoholic on top of that. Um, and, you know, alcohol hadn't even been part of my story up until this point. But when she opened up to me about the prostitution thing, she hadn't told anyone else about that. Nobody else really looked at her like, you know, she had a very almost squeaky clean image. Everyone was hitting on her, and she was just not, she wasn't allowing any of that to occur. She would shut guys down real quick, and she had a very distant interaction with anyone from the opposite sex. Obviously, something had happened along the way, and she'd been hurt, and she had trust issues with men. But that particular day, we were on the swing set, and she opened up about how she, you know, had eventually become a prostitute. She had moved to Palm Springs. Her parents had cut her off, and she became an escort. And she was, you know, she was almost teary-eyed telling me about it. She didn't have the drugs or the buffer of the drugs or alcohol to quell her feelings. So everything she was telling me was just raw, and you could tell it was something she had rarely talked about sober to somebody else. But she opened up to me, and it was just a little spark. From that point forward, I only had a few days left at the program. We were inseparable. And it was like right as I was leaving, I was like, man, you come right at the end. And I'm usually fall in love with the snap of the fingers when I'm in rehab because, like I said, I'm feeling low anyway, and love emulates some of the same dopamine rushes as doing drugs. So it's kind of, you know, a de facto method I use to self-medicate when I can't do drugs or alcohol, and this tends to happen when I'm in rehab. So I think that I have feelings for her, and I'm already going through the breakup. So, you know, the fact that I'm seeking female attention and trying to fall in love when I go to rehab every time anyway, you mix that with the fact that I'm already going through a breakup. I passionately thought that I was like in love with her. I'd only known her like 7 days, but I like convinced that I was in love with her. And, you know, I said, well, maybe this will work out better because I'll be out of the program and I know the meeting schedule, the outside AA meetings. So you start going to AA and NA meetings with, you know, the rehab will escort you to these meetings, and I'll just come and I'll meet you, and we'll just kind of like go off and do our own thing. And she was like, all right, cool. So one of the first things I did, so I move into this, I leave the program, and one of the first things I do in California, they give you Obama phones. I don't know if they do that everywhere, but all over LA, they have these little like booths, and they'll just give you a free smartphone. It's called an Obama phone. All you have to do is show them your driver's license, and they'll sign you up for it. They almost beg you to get one. And I always had like an iPhone, so I never needed one. But the reason that I wanted to get the Obama phone is because I was going to bring it to Haley so that we could communicate incognito while she was in this program. So I got her an Obama phone. We met up at an AA meeting as planned, and I gave her the phone. So she snuck the phone back into treatment, and now we were talking all the time. You know, she'd go up to her room, and she was just always talking to me on the phone. She let some of the other girls use her phone too, so that they wouldn't rat her out. And we started talking every night. This went on for like, I don't know, a week. And what had happened is somebody brought heroin into the treatment facility. Another girl that we were friends with, this girl Sierra, she had gone like on a home visit, or somehow, I don't know, maybe she had left the rehab, come back, and brought drugs. Whatever the case, this girl Sierra brought heroin to La Ventana. And Haley called me from the cell phone, and she was in a panic, and she's like, hey, I need you to come get me. And I'm like, what do you mean come get you? Now, I had a X5 BMW at the time. It's one of the only things that I still had left from my relationship with Casey. And, you know, they let me have this at the halfway house. And by the way, that halfway house was just what I thought it would be. They didn't care about anything. You know, they didn't make you work. They didn't care what you did. It was just kind of like a place to stay. And the house manager was an easy guy to get over on. So I was always just in my room talking to Haley on the phone. And she's like, I need you to come get me. Sierra brought heroin in, and I'm really scared that I'm going to relapse. And so that's all I had to hear. So we kind of coordinated me breaking her out of treatment. We're both running high on the fumes of delusion. Her thinking she wanted to leave because she wanted to get away from the drugs. Me thinking that I was doing something positive by breaking this very sick girl out of treatment. And I forgot to mention, she was also dangerously bulimic. So she had, she was dual diagnosis. She had bipolar, or she had bulimia, and she also had drug addiction, alcoholism. She was dealing, I mean, drug addiction's hard enough to deal with, but she was dealing with like severe bulimia on top of being an addict. And she was like rail thin. Like I said, Christina Applegate, but like a very like a junkie version of her, very skinny. And so we coordinated it, me thinking I'm doing a good thing by breaking this very sick person out of treatment. And she's like, okay, at 9 o'clock, I'm going to have my bags packed and I'm going to hide them in the bushes. And you just circle around the block a couple times, go very slowly. I knew where she was housed at. Go very slowly and you're going to see me. I'll run out to the street. So I circle the block a few times and I see her, you know, with her bags kind of shuffle, trying to scuttle in the middle of the street. And I stop my car, slam on the brakes, I get out, and I grab the bags. We had only kissed once at this point. We were meeting up at AA meetings, and one night, the night that I gave her the cell phone, you know, I went in and I kissed her. So we now had a quasi-physical relationship. We hadn't had sex yet, but we had kissed. So I grab her stuff, I put it in the car, and I'm like, all right, where are we going to go now? And she's like, oh, I don't know. We didn't really flesh out this part of the plan. And I'm like, you know what? This sober living that I'm living at is so ghetto. I could probably sneak you into this place. And she was just down for it. She's like, okay. So we drive to North Hollywood. And I had a roommate, but he was never there. He was like on parole. And he was making it seem like he lived at this place, but he was always gone with his girlfriend, even though he was supposed to be there. And I was covered for him. The house manager would come in with his little belly sticking out. He'd be like, where's Brian? I'm like, yeah, he's in the bathroom. Said that every time he came in. It's like 5-6 times a night. Okay. Mark something off on his clipboard. So I knew that I could probably sneak her in and get away with it. So we go there, park the car. She's in my car. And I go inside and I make sure the coast is clear. A couple dudes vegging out on the couch. They're always just there watching shit on TV. And I'm like, hey guys, care if I bring my girlfriend in here? And these guys are like catatonic. You know, they don't even talk. They're just kind of, no, we don't care. All right, cool. So I grab her and I sneak her into my room. And she sleeps there with me that night. I don't think we had sex. We didn't have sex that night. So next day, I tell her, I'm like, hey, I'm going to go get a job. She's like, okay. And I was like, because you can't stay at this halfway house forever. Eventually, you're going to get caught, even though we had gotten it off that day. And she's like, okay. So somebody at the Sober Living Inn hooked me up with a telemarketing job in Tarzana. And it was the kind of job where I would call and make home improvement leads. I'd generate home improvement leads all day. So I'd call people. I'd be like, hi, this is Ryan Leone. I'm calling to follow up on an inquiry you made on homeadvisor.com. My dad owns this general contractor company. We're licensed, bonded, and insured. Blah. I had this whole sales pitch. And I would generate appointments, and then we would sell the appointments to other general contractors. And I don't know, I made like $400 or $500 a week cash, something like that. But I'd gotten this job, and Haley stayed at the Sober Living, you know, while I'd go work. I got the job immediately, the day that I said I was. Somebody had already offered it to me, and I was like, nah, I don't really want to work. But now my whole plan was to work and find some like weekly hotel that you could pay cash. There's tons of shit like that in LA. So I go to work, and I work like, I don't know, 8-9 hour day. I wasn't used to working like that. I was exhausted when I got back, and she was just kind of hiding in my Sober Living, occasionally texting me and being like, oh my God, the house manager's lurking. I think he knows I'm in here. But she didn't get caught. And I end up coming home And I say, hey, do you want to go get something to eat? She's like, all right. So I have to sneak her out of the sober living to go get food. And when I pick her up, she's kind of acting weird. She's kind of just has like an attitude. And I'm like, hey, what's up with you? What are you doing? And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I don't know. You're kind of acting weird. Are you all right? She's like, yeah, I'm fine. She's like curled up in a ball in the passenger side of my car. And I'm like, all right. All of a sudden, she gets up and just pukes out of my window. And she pukes like so hard that it makes her fart. She's like super embarrassed. She's like puking. She's like, I'm like, damn, did you just fart? It's fucking gross, Haley. And she's just like, oh my God, I'm drunk. I'm so embarrassed. I'm like, what? You're drunk? I'm like, what the fuck? She's like, yeah, I'm drunk. I don't know. I was at the sober living all day, and like there was this weird guy there, and he asked me if I wanted to drink anything, and he got me a bottle of vodka. I'm like, who? Somebody gave you a bottle of vodka? And she's like, yeah, don't be mad at me. So I'm like, it's all good. So I had snuck out, I had a curfew. I think you had to be gone at 10. I get a call from the house manager who usually wasn't tripping. But this guy just like out of nowhere starts freaking out. And he calls me, he's like, where are you? And I'm like, I just went to go get Jack in the Box. He's like, we have a curfew. I need to see you right now. I'm like, oh my God. So I tell her what's going on. She's all wasted. She can hardly talk. She's like, she's curled up in the passenger seat. And I have to go back, and I'm like, come on, Haley, get out of the car. And she won't get out. So I get out, and I go talk to the manager, and he's like, I know that you have your girlfriend with you. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, another person at the house told me that you do, and you can't have her here. This is not a co-ed sober living. Either you have to leave, or she can't be. He's like, she can't be here. That's it. That's the only option I had. And I was like, fine, whatever. This place that I was working at, the telemarketing place, paid cash. And I think they gave me like, I don't know, like $120 or so. Enough to go get a hotel that night. So I tell him that I need to take her back to San Diego where she's from. And I'm like, give me at least tonight. I'll come back tomorrow. He's like, all right. Now remember, I'm pretty much mandated to be at the sober living house. The whole reason I'd gone to the sober living in the first place and not stayed at the rehab is because I wanted more freedom. But my PO is basically making me stay at this sober living. So I told him, I'm like, hey, my PO, like, I can't be discharged from here. If I just take her to San Diego, come back tomorrow, I'm cool, right? He's like, yeah, no problem. So I end up taking her to some like sleazy motel, and they didn't want to give us a room. And I'm like, why? There are people in front of us that got a room, and then it was our turn, and she's all like, she looks all fucked up because she's like barely awake. And I'm like, yeah, I need a room, 2 adults, I need 1 king-size bed. And they're like, no, we have no more rooms. And I'm like, well, you have vacancy sign up, what's up? And they're like, we have no more rooms. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So we're about to leave, and I see another couple, like an older couple, probably in their like 40s or 50s. They go up, and the guy pays for a room. And I'm like, what? How come you'll give them a room and you won't give us a room? He's like, because she's a prostitute. I'm like, dude, she's not a prostitute. She's my girlfriend. He's like, prove it. Show me your Facebook. I'm like, dude. I mean, we weren't like Facebook official or anything. So I ended up negotiating with the guy, and I was like, look, I'll give you $20 extra. We need a place to crash tonight. He's like, fine. He's like, but if I find out she's prostitute, I call police. I'm like, man, you're tripping. So I end up letting her just pass out on the bed, and she goes to sleep. I think we had sex for the first time in the morning or something. I think we took a shower in the morning and had sex. I don't remember. But, we had to come up with a plan because I was going to get in trouble with my PO, and now the sober living knew that she had been snuck in there. So I was really in kind of a bad position with the whole thing. And we will get into what happens in part 7 of the Relapse. I think part 7, 8, 9, like from this point forward, this is when shit gets really crazy. This particular run I was on with Haley was out of control. I think it's like one of the wildest periods of my life. It's kind of been leading up to the next few videos, but right after this, in my opinion, is when things get the absolute craziest. If you guys have ordered a book, I just got 150 of them in the mail. They take forever to get here, and I finally have them. So if you've been waiting on one, you don't have it by now, shoot me an email. Sometimes stuff slips my mind. If you've been waiting longer than you should have, I'll throw in a free blotter. I'll throw in something cool to make up for you waiting. I also have a special deal right now. I'm doing signed copy of my book and the signed blotter for $40, including it. Shipping's included. So $40 either on the Venmo, PayPal, or GoFundMe. Get a signed book and signed blotter. I was doing it for $60, then I was doing it for $50. I'm doing it for $40 until the new year. And I'm going to start doing my promotional stuff and shout outs at the end of videos so we can get right into the story. I know they can get annoying, but this is how I'm trying to generate my revenue right now. So sign book, sign blotter, $40, Venmo, PayPal, or GoFundMe. I appreciate all of you. Stay tuned because the next few videos, things are going to get fucking wild. Palabra.